Happy Monday, everyone. This is Martha with Nature Niche. And this week I'm following up on last week's post about all of the ways birds are naturally adapted to survive the winter months. And I'm going to focus on instead how we as humans can help them through winter. And we can do that by helping to support their basic needs, providing food, water, and shelter. As the owner of a nature store, I often see an uptick in wild bird feeding in the spring, but the real critical period where we can be most helpful to wild birds is offering supplemental food to them to offset their natural diets during the harsh winter months. When we do that, we want to make sure we're providing good quality, high energy foods when these resources are most scarce. And what we're trying to do is help them gather energy as quickly and efficiently as possible. So, timing is very important. The birds use a lot of energy to stay warm overnight, so they're burning lots of calories without taking more in during those nighttime hours. And so they need to eat right away in the morning. So it's helpful if you can put food out early and refill feeders again late in the day, right before sunset, so that they can get an extra energy boost before they go off to roost. One way I found to do that very efficiently is to use preformed seed cylinders, also known as seed logs, and seed cakes. They tend to last longer than loose seed does, and you can leave them up all night, especially if you have your feeders on a system that'll keep raccoons and other nighttime mammals away from the food. And it'll be ready for the birds each morning, even maybe before you're up and around, they may be active. It's important to note that where winter weather overlaps with hummingbirds, for example, Anna's hummingbirds along the west coast, it's helpful to keep food accessible as much as possible. So you can do that in a safely heated hummingbird nectar feeder, or you can have two feeders available and have one outside with the second one ready to swap in when the first one starts to get slushy and starts to freeze. It's important to consider where you're locating your winter bird feeders. We can really help the birds by placing them in a sheltered location out of the prevailing winds. We have our feeders set up near our garage so that it's easy to get out there and be able to maintain the feeders and access them in tough winter conditions. They're also close to our woodlot where there are lots of native trees and shrubs to provide natural shelter for the birds. And it's important to do that to help them maintain their body temperatures in cold and wet weather. It's also important to make sure you're keeping their feeders as covered as you can and as clean as you can. So it helps if you go out and brush off the snow, shake the feeders, especially the ones with small finch food in it, to help improve drainage, clear the ports. That photo was a picture of a feeder over this weekend that I should have probably pulled in before the storm, but I ended up having to scrape off some ice and snow to make sure the finches could still get food out of the ports. But it's important to consider using weather guards, different kinds of domes, and squirrel baffles to help minimize the amount of snow that's getting on the food and on the birds while they're sitting there eating. They'll be more comfortable if you can decrease precipitation and just help you have less work to do getting the feeders ready each day. It's important to change the feed weekly and make sure you're checking for mold, and you want to make sure you're disinfecting those feeders. For more details on that, check out Monday with Martha number 60 part B. It can also be helpful to feed with ground or open platform feeders, especially for those species that are more comfortable um, feeding on the ground, and those that don't tend to visit traditional bird feeders. You can also just pack down or shovel an area to minimize snow and then offer seed directly on the ground. And this helps birds like song, fox, white-throated and white-crowned sparrows, juncos, tree sparrows, and snow buntings, among many others that prefer to feed um, on the ground. And also, if you can't get to your feeders safely, ground feeding will work too, in a pinch. Just tossing the seed out so that it's on top and where the birds can get to it is better than getting hurt trying to get to your bird feeders in bad weather. I'm going to quickly run you through the best winter foods that provide high energy resources for your winter birds. I go into detail on this topic in Monday with Martha number 140. So that one's worth checking out too. But basically, high protein, high fat foods for winter feeding include suet, peanuts, black oil sunflower, sunflower hearts and chips, Niger, which is a trademark of the Wild Bird Feeding Institute, also sometimes called thistle seed, and dried fruit. So this is an example of one of my backyard feeding stations that's offering all of those food types. So suet is rendered animal fat, usually beef, and it's very high energy and easily digestible. And lots of species love this particular food. The woodpeckers, but many other kinds of clingers and songbirds. I find my eastern bluebirds tend to show up at the suet feeder, especially on snowy days. Peanuts are another high fat, high protein food offering. Make sure you're using ones without added salt, so not any peanuts from the grocery store, but ones specifically for wildlife. In-shell peanuts are great because they allow birds to do the caching. They do much better when stored for longer periods of time than the peanut splits. Peanut splits are easier to consume, however, and that's especially true for smaller birds, so more readily used by a wide range of species. You can also use peanut butter, use kinds that contain only peanuts as the ingredients, no added sugar or salt. And peanut butter can be mixed with suet and spread on feeders or trees and products like tree icing. Peanuts are also very easy to offer as part of a preformed seed cylinder. Shelled sunflower hearts or chips are another great winter bird food. They're quick and easy for birds of all sizes to be able to consume and feed efficiently. But per a study by Cornell Lab of Ornithology, the seed most preferred by the most diverse array of feeder birds is black oil sunflower seeds. So offering premium quality of these seeds is a great way to help your feeder birds. They have a high meat to shell ratio and are a good source of fat for our winter birds. I see all sorts of species. I offer them in our house blend Martha's Midland Songbird mix in this mini magnet feeder post mounted by Hilltop Specialties, and we see all sorts of birds taking advantage of the tray room and working on this black oil sunflower based mix. And Niger is another great food to offer, especially to help support our winter backyard finches. So everything from American goldfinches to the stripier pine siskins that you can see here, as well as common red poles and other small sparrows like this smaller seed. We have found that they really love it mixed with chopped sunflower hearts in the finch favorite mix that we offer. And I found when we do get that influx of finch species in the winter, especially a lot of pine siskins or common red poles, it helps to put up multiple finch feeders, even if they're smaller and you have to fill them more often, to spread them out so there aren't so many birds fighting for the same feeding ports. And lastly, you can offer our winter birds dried fruit in the form of cranberries, currants, raisins, even papaya chunks, juniper berries, which are really cones, and providing native plants that provide natural fruit sources for them as well. I find that the fruit can get sticky as it gets wet outside, and so my favorite way to feed it is integrated into a seed cylinder or seed cake. While these traditional wild bird supplemental feeds, I think, are fairly well known, I want to make sure we're thinking about natural food resources that we can provide for our wild birds as well. So think about species that are good for caching and that provide persistent winter fruit. So consider offering nut-bearing native trees and shrubs. Examples include many different oak species, as well as American beech, hickories, walnuts, and hazelnuts. And there are a lot of native plants that provide winter persistent fruit. And this is important emergency food source for the birds, often providing needed carbohydrates and antioxidants. So I go into this in more detail in Monday with Martha number 138, but briefly, some examples include sumacs, wild crabapple, viburnum species, especially high bush cranberry, and maple leaf viburnum. Different species of wild roses, Michigan holly, also known as winterberry, as well as many species of hawthorns, bayberry, hackberry, mountain ash, and Virginia creeper, a native ground cover and vine. Other native species that provide fleshy fruit for our wild birds in the fall help them greatly. It helps them layer on the fat in preparation for winter. And those species include dogwoods, chokeberry, blueberries, elderberry, huckleberry, gooseberry, wild grape, some other viburnums like nannyberry and arrowwood viburnum, and sassafras as examples. And don't forget to leave hard seed bearing native plants standing dead in the winter. Don't deadhead, but leave them so that the birds can enjoy those seed resources, species like black-eyed Susans, echinacea, other coneflowers, hyssop, bee balm and horsemint, white snakeroot, Joe pieweed, sunflowers, asters, and goldenrods. Just as important as high quality food is free, fresh, unfrozen water. That'll help keep the birds hydrated, and it is a very scarce resource in extremely cold temperatures. It's the most important resource that we can provide them during the harsh winter months. It's important to remember that by providing water in a heated bird bath and doing so safely, that you might see other bird species that won't necessarily come to feeders, but for that scarce water resource in the winter, you can attract them with a heated bath. It's also critical to provide our wild birds with shelter. That can be in many forms. It can be as straightforward as leaving snags or standing dead trees where it's safe to do so, or parts of trees, dead branches, places where cavities are to help our cavity nesting species. And I wanted to mention that woodpeckers are especially supported this way, and that they can make their own shelters specifically for surviving our cold winter nights. You can look for fresh wood chips over a new fallen snow. They excavate roosting cavities for themselves, usually in rotting snags, more so than the solid wood that they choose when they're making nesting cavities in the spring. They're often within about 6 feet of the ground, so about 3 times lower than your typical nesting cavities. But I challenge you in your next walk in the woods, look for some snags and overnighting or roosting cavities that the woodpeckers have made for themselves. We can also help provide shelter by creating wildlife brush piles. For more information about that, check out Mondays with Martha number 127. Planting and maintaining shrubby hedges or shrub masses with species like dogwoods and sumac and roses, and also promoting the growth of native vines like wild grape and Virginia creeper to offer really good, tightly woven places for the birds to get out of the weather and roost overnight. Another thing we can do is preserve or plant more native evergreen tree and shrub species in our landscapes. These are great places for birds to roost in winter. So, species like this eastern white pine tree, we have some of those on our property, but other pine species, red and white cedars, balsam fir, hemlock, yews, and common juniper are other examples. And then, of course, we can provide man made habitat structures to help provide shelter in bad weather events and for overnight roosting, like these woven roost pockets. You can leave your nest boxes up and winterize them. For more information about that and providing roost boxes, check out Mondays with Martha number 141. The key thing about roost boxes is that the entry holes are lower so that heat rises and gets trapped more easily in the box. They tend to have a little less ventilation and interior perches for multiple birds of multiple species to be able to use the roost box at once. I also leave my bluebird house up year round. This is what it looked like after the snow this weekend. And I just made sure before the winter weather set in that it was clean. And I provided some wood shavings at the bottom to make it a little cozier if one or more bluebirds or other small birds like downy woodpeckers wanted to use it overnight. And then, of course, our eastern screech owl saga continues as the screech owl we've had hanging around loves using the nest box for winter roosting. You can see his little face sticking out the entrance. And I've noticed that I can see him a little more reliably on these cold, snowy days or it's more overcast. I think he or she feels a little more comfortable hanging out the entrance a little longer into the morning and a little sooner at dusk, just less visible to the surrounding songbirds. So I hope these ideas and specific examples inspire you to figure out how you can better support wild birds in the winter in your own landscapes. Take care, have a good week, and continue to stay warm.